Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of you. We are back for another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. It is I, your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement. I'm joined by my co-host, P, coming from God knows where. And we are joined by the CEO and founder of ECI Development, Mike Cobb. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Q. Nice to be with you all today.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us, Mike. And for those who are not familiar with, to give a little bit of background on ECI, your work is rooted in real estate down in El Zonte in particular, correct? Talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing there.
Yeah, sure. Well, we started our company 26 years ago, so we've been around quite a while. We actually got our start in Belize. We also work in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. But most recently, yes, in El Zonte, in El Salvador. And the thing that's really kind of exciting for us is the ability to build a physical community for what has largely been an online community or a remote community, right? And so it really fits in well with who we are as a company and what we've been doing for so many years to now be able to do it for the Bitcoin community in El Salvador. So yeah, that's the latest and newest, and it's very, very exciting.
Talk to us first before we dive deep into El Zonte and all of that work. Yeah. How you first came to learn about Bitcoin. When was it, and what was your initial sort of reaction to Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, I was speaking at a conference in Belize back in late 2014, 2015, somewhere along there. And one of the speakers was someone I'd seen around at some of the other conferences that I speak at, Paul Rosenberg. And I don't know if you know Paul or not, but he's been in the space for a long time. He gave a presentation about Bitcoin and the blockchain and digital security. That's his specialty, is digital security. And he really encouraged me to buy some Bitcoin back in 2015. And sadly, I was way too busy and had a million things going on and did not, of course. That's the story many of us can tell. But that was my first exposure to it. And by the way, I love the concept. I thought, oh, this is awesome. Talk about something that's, it's decentralized. It pulls power away from, national governments and federal governments to control monetary policy, right? And it really provides a broad base of monetary exchange, right? I got it. I mean, that was the basis of his presentation, right? Then there was the whole crypto and security side of it and the privacy side of it too. So it all made sense to me. Sad I didn't, follow his advice and pick up some at the time, but it put it on my radar screen. And then 2-3 years later, sometime in 2017, somebody approached our company and said, hey, would you be willing to take Bitcoin for one of your teak? We're also in the agricultural space. We've done a lot of teak plantations over the years. I planted a teak plantation in Panama back in 1999. And those trees are now, 23 years old. But we were approached by somebody who was interested in owning a part of the plantation, asked if we would take Bitcoin. And this was, I think, 2017. And we looked at it and we talked about it briefly internally. We said, yeah, we'll take Bitcoin. So we did. It was a very small transaction. It was, $6,000-7,000. It wasn't a big transaction, but we took it in Bitcoin, and sadly, we did not keep it again. And then that's sort of the nature. By the way, one of the things I'm most excited about El Salvador is that it is a legal tender in that country, whereas everywhere else I work, when I get Bitcoin, I can't spend that Bitcoin on concrete blocks, steel, windows, doors. We build houses, we build condominiums, right? So we have to take the Bitcoin and we have to turn it into dollars for the most part. We keep a small percentage now, but we have to turn the biggest chunk of it into dollars so we can pay our suppliers. The nice thing about El Salvador is that will we actually be able to take that Bitcoin and use it in our transactional contracts with our contractors and with our suppliers in El Salvador, and we won't have to convert it out of Bitcoin. But yeah, that was our first transaction, 2017 for a teak parcel. Yeah.
Could you maybe share a little bit of what the pros and cons your team came up with for that initial transaction? What were some of the people who were against Bitcoin really saying in their argument for why they shouldn't or why you shouldn't accept Bitcoin as payment here?
Q, let me say that I don't think there was anyone in our organization that was against taking the Bitcoin. The only challenge was how we were going to take it. We didn't have a wallet, right? I mean, there were just what I'm going to call just administrative, clerical kinds of challenges to taking the Bitcoin. I think we were all on board with it. The conversations internally were more of how are we going to do it? So we had to set up a wallet, right? And we didn't have one. And for a company to set up a wallet, especially in 2017, it was very, very challenging. And so what we did was we actually set up a personal wallet to take that first transaction, which isn't a great corporate thing, because obviously you want to keep corporate and private separate, from individuals. But we set up a private individual wallet. We took that transaction and we moved those funds from the wallet, from the cash into the company at that point. But it really, the thing that we're on the leading edge. I mean, we started working in Belize 26 years ago, right? We've worked in Nicaragua for 22 years. We're on the front edge. We're a very adventurous company. And so taking Bitcoin wasn't really a stretch for us, philosophically or at a corporate level at all. It was just an administrative function of, how do we do it? And we've since set up a corporate wallet that took some time. Obviously, the KYC, know your client, the whole anti-money laundering, and then the underlying beneficial owner, ultimate beneficial owner. I mean, those are the kinds of things that come into play. And the compliance paperwork is complicated when you're a company, because you're not just an individual. For an individual to fill out that paperwork is pretty easy. But for a company to do it, it's more complicated. It's more cumbersome. We worked through those challenges, and we now have a wallet. But yeah, we were excited. We wanted to take the Bitcoin, and to really get that first Bitcoin transaction in house, and we did, and a lot more have followed since.
You found you're talking about this transaction that happened in 2017, 2018. In that time, I think the entire Bitcoin ecosystem has done a really good job of, increasing both its exposure as well as product offerings for the less technical people like myself. Have you guys shifted that sort of wallet approach? Has it become easier over time with these new offerings? Or are you still using sort of the original wallet that you guys have used?
Yeah, good question. We as quickly as we could. I think it was actually 20. It took us another couple years, so it was 2020 before we actually were able to set up a corporate wallet, which we did with Coinbase, and we've tied it to a Citizens Bank account, so it's a direct tie into our corporate bank account as well. And it's been working really well for large transactions, real estate transactions. The one place where we're shifting now, I think, to BitPay. I think that's right. I'm not 100% sure, but we're shifting out of Coinbase exclusively because we want the ability to do smaller transactions. We have a hospitality business as well, right? We develop homes, condominiums, resort communities. And for some people who want to live there, it's great. And we do have a lot of full-time residents living at our resort communities. But when people aren't there, or for some of the folks who are investors, they want to be able to rent their properties. And so one of the things we had to have, and we had to really develop, was this hospitality piece to be able to take smaller transactions without, what I'm going to call the enhanced due diligence. Like if somebody's buying a $150,000 condo or home, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that. If somebody's going to, come stay 3 nights for, $350, it's a different level of due diligence. And so we wanted the ability to have sort of a bifurcation administratively, the big transactions that require a lot of due diligence, and then the smaller transactions that require, less due diligence. And so I think we've been able to figure that out. But in both cases now, they are ECI wallets, not personal wallets.
So talk to us now a little bit. We've talked about this transaction in Belize and the due diligence that you and your team sort of put into when exploring these opportunities for both potential renters or potential buyers, as well as those investors you guys work on behalf of. Talk to us about how you guys saw the opportunity in El Zonte. This is ground zero for how Bitcoin citadels look, operate, how Bitcoin has risen up. When did you guys start getting involved there?
Well, yeah, it was almost a year ago. It was last June when there was the Bitcoin conference in Miami. It was over in the Arts District, and it was we were speaking. I was speaking in one of the venues. We also had a booth in the exhibit hall, and it was on the second day of the conference. And in fact, I mean, we've kind of kept track of what's going on. Obviously, we're in that community, and so we kind of heard the rumblings. Yeah, El Salvador is going to do something, and and I hate to say it, I hate to say I'm cynical, but I hear a lot of like something's going to happen. Well, when it happens, let me know, right? And so I pay attention to the to the rumbles, but when it really happens, that's ultimately what we're going to act on, right? So we kind of heard the rumblings that Bukele was going to do some stuff in El Salvador. We're keeping our ear to the ground on that. And then on the second day of the conference, we had our booth. We were swamped, by the way. And it's interesting because I don't get it, Q. I really don't understand why there aren't more realtor, developer, folks like us in this space. I think we were the one of two exhibitors at that conference last year in the real estate space. There was a Miami developer with a condo project there in Miami, and then there was us, and we're all offshore, right? We do everything in Central and South America. And by the way, same thing is true this year. I think there were two, maybe three exhibitors. There was the Bitcoin Towers guys, there was us, and then I think one more real estate group at the conference. But but it is what it is, right? But last year in June, we were there. We were swamped. We had people stacked up at the booth, solid 3 days. And I'm out in front of the booth, and this guy comes up and introduces himself. He says his name is Mike Peterson, and I didn't know who Mike Peterson was, right? I've been listening to some rumblings on the ground about El Salvador, but I hadn't really dug in very much on it. And so this guy introduces himself, Mike Peterson, and he's in the food business, and he's got this piece of property in El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach. And I say, yeah, right. He says, would you guys be interested in talking about a joint venture? I said, well, sure. And again, I don't know who he is at this point. It's just some guy named Mike in the food business in San Diego. And I say, okay, Mike, because I get approached by this a lot, right? I mean, at conferences, probably at every conference, one or two people comes up to me and says, hey, I've got this piece of property. Would you be interested in doing something with me? And so the first thing I say is, probably, let's see, let's look at it. Send me a copy of your title. That's the first thing. Lots of people say they have property, they don't, right? Send me a copy of your title, send me a map, send me 4 or 5 pictures, and send me any kind of write-up, or if you have topography or anything on the property. So that's, Mike and I, we talk for a little bit, and it's a nice casual conversation. He goes away, and okay, whatever, I forget about it. On Tuesday, I start getting emails into my inbox with title, pictures, map, survey, all that kind of stuff. I think, all right, he's real. So whatever, we go back and forth, and over the course of maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we kind of figure out a letter of intent, right? Like what's it going to look like to put a deal together? And so I hand it off to my business partner, who's an attorney. And the next morning I get a call. This is 5 weeks into it. I get a call from his secretary, Mary, and Mary goes, hey, Mike, do you know who you're working with in El Salvador? And I'm thinking, well, all right. I don't know where this is going. She goes, no. I said, oh, yeah, Mike Peterson. She goes, yeah, but do you know who he is? I said, I don't know. Some guy has a food business. She goes, he's the godfather of Bitcoin in El Salvador. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah. I just sent you a link to the Forbes article. And so, okay. So a couple things about that. I really, really appreciated the fact that he didn't brag on himself. He didn't say, who he was, other than this guy, Mike, has a piece of land. And he followed through, and we worked out a whole deal, and it never even came up what his real foundational piece of bringing Bitcoin into the country of El Salvador was, and how he did it. And I, obviously, I called him up a few minutes later. I'm like, hey, man, why didn't you tell me any of this stuff, right? And anyway, we laughed. We had a good conversation, but it's been a real pleasure getting to know Mike and Brittany, his wife, and Jorge and Roman and the whole team down there, that whole, Bitcoin Beach community, and what they've done with Hope House over the years. These are exactly the kind of people that we want to do business with. And it was really serendipity. Honestly, Q, it wasn't something I tried to do. Mike sought us out as a potential development partner for his property. So that's really how it came about.
I'm assuming you have made your way down and personally like seen El Zonte.
Yes.
What was the experience like the first trip down?
Well, okay. So I lived in Nicaragua. I moved to Nicaragua in 2002 with my wife and my 2-year-old daughter. And, we went there to get our Grand Pacifica community started. And we thought we would be there for, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 years. That's how I sold it to my wife. I'm like, honey, we got to go to Nicaragua for a few years, get this project started. And what was funny was, about 3.5 years into it, she and I went out to dinner, and we'd kept our home in the US where I am today. And we kept our home in the States. And because we thought we were coming back in a couple of years, and it rented out, and we're in a little college town, so it's good. And we went out to dinner, and we'd had another daughter came along, so now we had 2 daughters, and we went out to dinner, and we made the list. We just wrote down every single reason we could think of to stay in Nicaragua versus go back to the US. And it was very quickly apparent, like, we were staying in Nicaragua, but we kept making the list, all the things we missed back home. There weren't many, and all the good things for either. And we ended up staying in Nicaragua, 11 more years. We were in Nicaragua a total of 14 years. And so, and I'd been to El Salvador a few times over the years. In fact, I was invited there about 5 years ago as a guest of the government to come look at developing there. So I'd already kind of put a brain power to it. I'd met with some of their tourism and housing folks. So I had some, some background already when I went to El Zonte for my first trip, which was, I guess, July or August of last year. I don't remember at this point, but prior to the big day of September 7th. But anyway, my impressions when I got there was that it was it reminded me a lot of Nicaragua. It was, it's the same kind of climate. It's really the same ocean, 100 miles north, right? The same climate, the same geography, about 100 miles north. The thing that El Zonte has and El Salvador has is a much larger economy. The GDP is higher. You can just tell. It's not nearly as poor as a country like Nicaragua, but in so many ways it's familiar. The Spanish they speak is very similar. The accent was familiar to me. I learned to speak Spanish a little bit in Nicaragua, but for me, it kind of felt like home. Again, having lived in Nicaragua for 14 years, when I go back to Nicaragua now, and I'm there, 5-6 times a year, I feel at home. I drop right in. I'm at home. And when I went to El Zonte, I really felt at home again. It's a small town on the ocean. But it's vibrant. It's a small town, but it's vibrant, and I think that really has to do, obviously, with what's happening in Bitcoin, and also what Mike and Jorge and Ramon and the team have done there to bring vitality and vibrancy to a struggling community. Certainly during the COVID period, but again, what happened with Bitcoin during the COVID time really kept that community vibrant in a way that I think other communities, a few miles up and down the coast, the whole coast kind of thing, really didn't get the benefit of that, and didn't thrive as much as El Zonte did during a really, really tough period, right?
I love that. It's also so incredible to hear just like your experience just all throughout Central America. I'm curious, just what is, of any place you visited in that region of the world, what is your favorite?
Nicaragua is my favorite because I lived there. I raised some daughters. I got a ton of memories. My little girls, doing, rescuing sea turtles and baby turtle releases. You are up in the jungle, up in the cloud forest. Just tons of great memories that we as a family built in Nicaragua. So, it's just so near and dear to my heart. But certainly, believe it or not, El Salvador, but I'm going to be very specific, not the country, but El Zonte as a town grabs my heart in a powerful way. And so it probably comes in number 2. And the other thing that from a company perspective, right, from a whole like top down looking down at the country of El Salvador, just the fact that here's a leader who said, you know what, we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender. I mean, wow. Let me just be just like, wow. I mean, flabbergasted. I mean, again, you hear the rumblings, you hope it happens, but to actually see somebody do it. So when that kind of thing happens at a country level, and then you've got this little fun, funky, surf town, beach town, that the two layer together pretty nice. I really like El Zonte. And, and the other thing is the people, I've become friends with Jorge. I've become friends with Ramon, obviously Mike and Brittany. And so when you make the personal connections with people, then it changes that dynamic again, significantly as well. I'm a fan of Panama. I like Panama. I've been spending a lot of time there since the mid 90s, speaking at conferences. Obviously, our teak plantation, we're developing a couple resort communities there too. It has a similar feel to, again, the Pacific side of Central America kind of has a pretty common geography or geographic feel to it. But that small town, I grew up in a small town in Northwest Pennsylvania, and small towns really do it for me. And by the way, sometimes people laugh because I always say that, Nicaragua is a small town. I mean, no matter where you go in the country, you see people, you see somebody, right? So Nicaragua is a small town, but El Zonte is truly a small, but vibrant, fun place with.
So Mike, as I've very well established and everyone who tunes into the show knows, do not own property. I live in my mother's basement. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you're going to have to talk to me like I'm a kid who lives in his mom's basement.
All right.
Walk us through the differences, or at least maybe paint the picture, because most of our audience does live in North America and the United States, or just in Western developed countries. What are sort of the steps it takes for you guys to plan and execute building these type of properties in more developed parts of the world versus in Central America, and then more specifically in El Zonte?
Yeah. I don't know that the process, like the actual process, is very different, but there are certain pieces of the process that are accentuated in North America that may be less so in Central America, and vice versa. And so I'll just give one example. Let me back up and say that, there's a belief, I would say a bad belief. I don't know. I mean, that's a moral judgment, but let me make it. There's a bad belief that the way to do business in Latin America is to bribe and pay people off, right? I mean, it's sort of the way things are done kind of thing. We've been in business 26 years as a development company. We've never paid a bribe in 26 years. And it's made our job more difficult at times because, it is somewhat expected. Maybe it's more prevalent than it is in the US, although I'm pretty sure it probably happens up here too, right? But the point is that, we've taken a stance. We're not gonna pay bribes. We're not gonna pay people off. And where that impacts your business. So in the US, in the development business, the first thing you do is entitlements or permitting, right? Generally called permitting. And so let's get through you own the property, you find a partner. That part's kind of similar, right? Now, what's the next thing you do? Well, you begin a permitting process. You begin the entitlement of the property. You get, you do, if there are zoning issues, if there are always environmental impacts, there are construction permits, and all the engineering to make sure that you're doing it right. That process in the US tends to be fairly cumbersome and fairly long. In a state like California, that can take a decade. I mean, literally, you can own a property and not be doing anything to it for a decade. In Central and South America, that process is fairly compressed, right? It's a lot shorter. It might be 12 to 18 months if you do it right. And we do it right. I mean, we want to be responsible corporate citizens. We are responsible corporate citizens, but when you do it, you've got, you hire the engineering companies, you build out, your plans, you submit those plans, you get your environmental permits, you get your construction permits, then you can actually move to construction. Well, that process takes shorter in Central America, longer in the US. However, when you get to the point of getting started, then it flip-flops. Actually, the actual construction of, say, infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, telecommunications, all of those kinds of things, homes in any kind of big quantity, that happens a lot faster in the US because you've got a lot more machinery, you've got a lot more sophistication in the process, right? Because it is a process. All of that's a process. Whereas it drags out more in Central America because you might not have the equipment, the process, the systems, the contractors, the ability to outsource a lot of things just simply doesn't exist. So you got to home grow a lot of things, right? So that takes longer, whereas it takes shorter in the U.S. But that's about it. It's kind of a flip flop. I think on the big spectrum, I would say that probably, and it's state by state. Some states are faster than others. California is probably the worst. You start a project, you might not be selling or building houses for 5 to 10 to 12 years. Other states it might be 2-3 years. And so I think Central America kind of fits in there. 2-3 years from acquisition of a property to the delivery of the first homes. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in El Zonte. I mean, we put our agreement together with Mike last summer, last fall. We had our zoning changes done, which was great. We're in the process of working with the engineering firm right now to produce the documents for infrastructure, again, roads, water, sewer, so that we can actually submit for our environmental permit. And once we submit those, the time frame is 6 months to 18 months, right? You don't know, but hopefully we can move things through fairly quickly. Let's call it 9 to 12 months. So it's about a year from right now, Q, before we would actually have product that we could bring to the marketplace, where we could actually say, okay, here's the home, here's how much it costs, here's where it's going to go. And if we start it, 90 days from now, you'll have it in 10 months or whatever, right? So it's really 3 years. I mean, that's the timeline. If you do it right, start to finish, it's about a 3-year window on the front side. And then obviously, once you start building, you build large, and we build large communities, right? We build anything from, maybe, 3-4 dozen homes or condos up to, several thousand addresses. And I think the El Zonte project, again, we've proposed, and we don't know yet because we have to get back permits to give us the permission to do this, but we're anticipating somewhere around 200 to 300 addresses on this site, which is a village. I mean, that's really what we do. We build villages. And when you get 200 to 300 addresses and you figure about 1.5 people per address on average, right? You're at about 400 to 500 folks who become part of this village. And that really becomes a community in some neat ways. I mean, it's dynamic. You have enough people to have different neighborhoods or different groupings, right? Different friendship circles and that kind of stuff. But yet, if you want to do something like a concert or get everybody together, you can get a few hundred people together and people can come together and you'll know everybody. At least you'll know them by sight. You might not really know them as friends, but in a village, everybody knows everybody else. And that sense of community is really powerful. And in fact, I'll just tell a quick story. At our Grand Pacifica community last fall, a guy, one of our residents, hit 2 boys, little boys, like a 13, 14-month-old and about a 4-year-old, hit him with his truck that was glare. He didn't see him. He ran over him. And both were in the hospital for a little bit of time. And one with some pretty serious stuff. They're both recovered. But I can tell you that the community rallied around both the family of the kids who got hit and the guy who'd hit him. I mean, he was despondent with grief. I mean, he just, run over a couple little kids, right? So like the community came together and supported both of these folks in ways that was powerful. And it was truly, as a developer, as someone who's, built the physical part of this, right? The old saying, concrete, steel, and lumber make the buildings, but people make the community. And so we did our part with the concrete, steel, and lumber, but the people who were there and the community that was there rallied around these folks. And that's what's really going to be special about what we're doing in El Zonte as well. Because look, the one thing that I noticed last year at the June conference, the Bitcoin conference in June in Miami last year, was how electric it was. And I've seen this. I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years, and our business for the first 20 of those years or 23 of those years was mostly retiree and pre-retiree, right? but there's an electricity in the air when you get people together who share common philosophies and common excitement about something, right? And it's largely been this idea of an expat lifestyle, right? So we get the pre-retirees together. They're all happy to be together because now they don't feel like a freak talking about moving to Mexico or moving to Nicaragua of all places, right? Or Belize or wherever, with the people around them, because like everyone else is kind of thinking the same thing, right? When I got to that Bitcoin conference in June, it was quickly apparent, not in the conference room, but obviously in the exhibit hall in the conference room. That's always loud and noisy. Where I noticed it was when we went to that little taco place. I can't remember the name of it now. Great taco place, by the way. There was a line, I don't know, half a mile long, wrapping around the block, and there were people everywhere. The excitement in the line of people waiting to get into that taco stand, it wasn't just my group of two talking with my people, or 3 or 4 people. It was people up and down the line talking and getting to know the people around them. That almost never happens. That is excitement. That's electricity. That's tribe. And so for us to be able to build a physical community where folks can get together, the desire, you could just tell the desire to talk to other Bitcoiners was real, and it was happening. I mean, they were getting to know one another standing in this line, right? And to be able to build a place that people can enjoy that whenever they want. If they want to go on vacation, they can enjoy it for a week or 2. If they want to live there part of the year, they can enjoy it part of the year. If they want to become a full-time resident, they can enjoy it year round. That's really special. And of all the things that drives me, it's truly the delivery of community. Again, I'll do my part. I'll put in the concrete, steel, and lumber, right? That's what I do, right? But when the people come together and create real community, it's special. And this community specifically, the Bitcoin community, is one that doesn't really have a physical place, right? There is no physical place. The one outlier on that may be Puerto Rico. I think, a lot of folks went to Puerto Rico early on that were in the Bitcoin space. They tended to be the whales or the mega whales, but that's okay too. I mean, like, hey, everybody needs a community, but this particular community, I think, will be much more affordable, right? We hope to have product in the $200,000 range, maybe even sub 200 for some small studio stuff, because we want to make it as inclusive as possible. We want to get people who are part of the tribe, who are part of the Bitcoin community, and give them the ability to have ownership, to be able to enjoy, the society of other people around them in this village. So, Q, I went off on a tangent. I have no idea what the question was. I hope I answered it. I don't even know. I'm sorry.
I'm being completely honest with you, Mike. I don't remember what the question was, but I enjoyed the story.
I just want to jump in there. It's super interesting to me. One of the questions that I was going to ask is, who is the intended audience for this community? And I think you started to answer it, but what type of Bitcoiners are going to be, moving into this space? What are the types of features that may be unique to this space versus just, the types of developments that you built in the past?
Sure. Well, let me say that I think it's the people that will make it distinct, right? And so again, to the extent that let me answer it a little bit more specifically, and then we'll come back to the general. One of the things that we've done and we're doing now is we've built tiny homes, anything from and the square footages are misleading, right? So there's sort of the air, I'm going to call it, internal, quote unquote, air conditioned space, 350 to say 500 square feet, right? But in the tropics, which, El Zonte is, most people live outside. When we lived in Nicaragua, literally, we got up in the morning, we opened up our doors, we had sliding glass doors, we opened them up. We didn't have screens, right? I mean, we just literally opened up to the world, to the outside, and we lived indoors, outdoors, most of the time on our patio. There's a nice breeze. And so you don't need a lot of inside space, and so say 400 to 500 square feet, because then if you have rooftop and you have some patio space on the first floor that's covered is the key, right? The sun is strong, the sun is hot, right? and in the rainy season, it rains, right? But so if you can cover your patio space and have a rooftop that's also covered, now all of a sudden, say 400 square feet actually turns into about 1,200 square feet of livable space. The really cool thing is you're only paying for the construction of about 400 hard, right? And the roofs cost a little bit of money too, but they don't cost what it costs to actually build walls and windows and, and all that kind of stuff, right? So you're really paying for 400 square feet, but you're getting livable space of, say, 1,000, 1,200 square feet on a smaller, tiny home. Well, when you do that, you bring the product into the realm of affordability for folks. And again, the reason I can't really talk, so at Grand Pacific, let me talk specifically there because I have numbers and I could talk about them, right? We know what it costs to build in Nicaragua. We know what the infrastructure cost is per address because we've already built it. We've paved the road, we ran the water, right? Those kinds of things. So we actually have homes that start about $135,000, about 150 yards from the ocean at Grand Pacifica, right? So somebody comes along and we actually can offer up to 80% financing. So somebody comes along with, say, $25,000, $30,000, in upfront deposit, they can actually own one of these tiny homes and begin to use it and enjoy it, and so it brings ownership of property, not just overseas, but in this case overseas, to a realm of affordability that most folks don't imagine is possible. And what we're seeing, P, is we're getting people who are truly digital nomads. I mean, it's funny, that word, that word has been thrown around a lot, but our company is 26 years old. We have been a remote digital nomad company for 26 years because we've worked in multiple countries of the region. And so, if our marketing department is in Belize, they're still doing work for our Nicaragua and our Costa Rica and our Panama company. So we've been crisscrossing this remoteness for the entire existence of our company. And so the concept was very familiar. And so it wasn't a stretch at all. In fact, it was just this natural progression when we started to look at tiny homes that we could say, you know what, these are perfect for people who want to work remotely. And so we brought it into the realm of affordability. The thing that got really exciting is when, COVID and the lockdowns and all the stuff from COVID happened. This is big. And actually there's a convergence of things happening right now that I remain optimistic, but it's so big, it could be scary. Think about this. For the first time in human history, work and the location of work have been decoupled, right? First time in when we were hunter-gatherers, we had to be there to gather or hunt. And when we went agriculture, we had to be there to till the fields. When we moved from agricultural to industrial, we had to show up and run the machines, right? Starting in the 70s, you had guys like Alvin Toffler with Future Shock and John Nesbitt with Megatrends. These guys in the 70s, early 80s were talking about this word post-industrial society, right? But 80s came, the 90s came, 2010, right? It wasn't until last year that for the first time, people actually could take advantage of this technological reality, which let them work from home. It was insane, right? People got in their cars and drove 2 hours to work on their computer or talk on the phone, right? We don't need to do that. We know we don't need to do that. But the bosses, the companies and the management were like, no way. Because if I let you work from home, I'm pretty sure that you're going to watch Game of Thrones all day or whatever they thought you were going to do, right? And the employees were afraid to ask, because if I ask if I can work from home, well, I'm probably not going to get that promotion that I thought I was going to get, right? So we have this decoupling of work and the location of work. First time in human history, we really have transitioned into this, post-industrial society for many people, not for all people, but for many, many people, right? That is huge. Now we're going to layer on this idea of world money, right? A truly international currency that's not controlled by any federal government. These two things together, I think they're an exponential. I truly believe this is an exponential. It's not an additive quality. I think it's not 3 + 3, it's 3 × 3, right? And it's scary in some great ways, And it's scary in some scary ways, because there are a lot of entrenched interests that don't want either of these things to really go as far as they're probably going to go, right? I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Like, there's no putting this cat back in the bag in either case, right? There's not. But how it goes and the reaction of the entrenched interests who are strong and powerful, and in many cases, federal governments, right? National governments who have the monopoly on violence, right? That's legal violence, right? That's the statement. I'm a fairly libertarian guy, and I don't mind calling it like I see it, right? But national governments have the monopoly on legal violence, right? And those big governments are entrenched interests in many ways. Corporations, likewise, are big entrenched interests. So this convergence of these two things is powerful. And for the consumer, for the person who I believe is into Bitcoin, who's a Bitcoiner, right? And understands that the power of that for their life and the control of their financial future, right? This is a big deal. And then there's the second element, and I give a lot of presentations about second residencies, right? I talk about this thing called a plan B, because, and in fact, this is the presentation I've given at the Bitcoin conference now a couple times. And it's this notion that Bitcoin gives us financial freedom, or it's a big part of financial. It's not total, but it's a big part of financial freedom. If we have Bitcoin, we've got a lot of the elements of financial freedom in our hands. But what we don't have, and the mistake that I think people make, the misleap, the false leap, is that because I have financial independence and I have financial freedom, I also have personal freedom. But that's not the case. That's not the case, because you're still, if you don't have a second residency outside your home country, you're a prisoner of your country, right? And so having this second residency, having a way to be legally allowed to live outside your home country for as long as you want, this is really important for personal freedom. And so this convergence of financial freedom and personal freedom, and this decoupling of work and the location of work, when you put those together, somebody who says, you know what, I have Bitcoin, I want to work, I can work from anywhere, I love to surf, I want to live where it's warm, whatever their reason is or reasons are, right? I love pupusas, I don't care, I mean, whatever it is, right? I want to live in El Salvador, right? So you've got the ability to work from anywhere, you've got the desire to live in El Salvador, you've got the affordability. Again, not everybody can afford it, but when you can put, say, $30,000 down, 30, 50,000, I don't know, pick a number, $30,000 to $50,000 down, you've brought property ownership overseas into a realm of affordability for a lot more people than if your property start at 250 and go up, right? That's a big difference too. And so when you put all those factors together, what I believe, and I'm finally getting to your answer, Pete, I'm going to get here right now. The people who I see becoming the core resident group, the core of the village at El Zonte for what we're doing there, are going to be remote workers, right? People who have the ability, whether they choose to do it there or not. They're people who largely have the ability to do that. They have some measure of financial freedom because they're into Bitcoin, and they want to be around other people who share that sense of adventure, but also the common interests in working remotely and being in a fun place together. That's really, I would say, the foundation of it. Yes, will there be product that's more than 150, 200? I'm sure there will be. I mean, we plan to have product kind of at all price stratas. But again, as part of a village, that works too. I mean, you get when you've got lots of different levels of income and wealth, not just income, but lots of different wealth levels. And you see that at the conference, I mean, there are whales walking around, and there are people with 3 Satoshis in their pocket, right? I mean, they're still talking about the same stuff. They're enjoying the company of one another, right? Because it's about a philosophy. It's about a way of life when you move it to a village, right? But it's about a philosophy at a conference or something like that. But when you move it to a location, like, it actually becomes a way of life, and your level of wealth and your level of income are a lot less important in that. But we want to make it, as inclusive as possible. And then the other thing that's happening now is you've got companies like Salt and Milo and some others. I think Abro's coming out with a product. I don't know. It's kind of evolving, right? Who are giving people mortgages with their Bitcoin as collateral. And we're just scratching the surface of companies that are going to do that. None of them right now do it offshore. It's all domestic. And so the next evolution, I think, we've engaged each of those three companies that I just mentioned to say, hey, hello, let's try to do it overseas too. Let's not just lock it into a US product. And we're getting some people listening. So hopefully that'll change the financing dynamic for folks with Bitcoin that they want to pledge as collateral as well. So again, lots of different levers that people can pull to make this work for them.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, one of the panels that I was super excited to build out at the conference was there was one that was focused specifically on Bitcoin mortgages. I think that's a really interesting, and really important developing system.
It is. Well, Pete, if you've got any influence with those guys, beat them up real good and tell them to take a look at doing some stuff offshore too. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I didn't realize that they're only US based. That's super interesting.
Yep. And I understand, because I think most of them are actually looking at cross collateralizing. They collateralize with the Bitcoin, but they also collateralize the property.
Yep.
And so I get it. I mean, how do you collateralize a house in El Salvador? Right.
Got it, yeah.
But at a certain amount of Bitcoin, right, you don't need that cross collateralization anymore. But although it's not hard to collateralize a house in El Salvador either, actually. So again, it could be their model with offshore, or it could just be enhanced Bitcoin collateral to do it. But yeah.
The people that were on that panel were Ledin, Hoseki, and Milo, and I think you're right that they only offer US based mortgages
so far.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, do you mind talking a little bit? Because I know at the very beginning you touched on the fact that the very first Bitcoin transaction was seemingly for all intents and purposes, an all cash transaction. And then you guys moved on from that, except the cash in this instance was Bitcoin. Talk to us about the hurdles of accepting Bitcoin, both as a payment for cash versus using it as collateral to then take some more payments down the line, and what risk assessment you have to take as a result of that.
Yeah, sure. Again, the issue for us, we actually have, I'll make up a number, and we have about 150 employees of the company, direct employees, outside contractors, and construction people too, but about 150 people kind of in the company. And I think 15 or 20 of them are actually taking Bitcoin as part of their compensation program, which is tremendous. And so, we have a group of people in the company that are obviously very enthusiastic about Bitcoin and are taking part of their compensation in it. But outside of that, there's nothing we can do. That's not true. We paid our engineering firm. That's not true. We paid our engineering firm in El Salvador in Bitcoin. So that was maybe our first third-party transaction that occurred in Bitcoin, which is exciting. And that happened late last year, I think early this year, I don't remember. Anyway, but outside of that one specific example, there is nothing we can do with our Bitcoin other than keep it, which we are keeping some of it, other than just, pay the employees who want to get paid in Bitcoin. The challenge for us as a company, again, is that, we have to buy concrete, steel, lumber, windows, doors, everything it takes to build, homes and condominiums. And so we have to convert the biggest part of our Bitcoin into fiat. And we do. And I'm happy to share this. We're a very transparent company. Our profit margin on our product is somewhere between 21 and 23%. That's our profit margin, 21 to 23%. So right now we have a standing order with Coinbase that when the money comes in, 95% of it gets converted to dollars immediately, and 5% stays in Bitcoin. And that 5% that stays represents about 25% of our profit. right? That's 25% of our profit. So we're willing to keep 25% of our profit there. The rest of it, we move into dollars so that we can transact for all the stuff we need. Again, in El Salvador, it's going to be very, very different because we're going to have the ability to accept the Bitcoin from a client and immediately pay our concrete supplier or our steel supplier or our road builder or whatever it is, or our house builder, right? Or our employees, right? And so that changes the dynamic of what we can do and what we will do with Bitcoin as we receive it. And there'll probably be people, like if we have to buy stuff from Mexico, which we will. I mean, again, not everything's made in El Salvador, right? So the stuff we have to buy from other places, we're still going to have to convert and pay in fiat. But a bigger chunk of our transactional business will be in Bitcoin in El Salvador. And for us, philosophically, that's really important. Again, I mentioned I'm a libertarian. I love the idea of this, financial independence. And for me, the ability to transact as much as possible in Bitcoin is highly attractive philosophically, right? I love it. I think it's tremendous and I want to do more of it. But I'm also a businessman and I have to be realistic and practical. I can only do it to the extent that I can do it. But I don't know, did that answer the question?
I think to a degree, yeah. I'm
Okay.
curious though, if like accepting Bitcoin or this shift over the last 5 years that your company has taken to really adopting Bitcoin, has that changed any risk calculations when incorporating sort of price fluctuation of Bitcoin, or how does that factor into anything?
Yeah, good question. Now, sorry, I missed that on the first go. So, we mentally, I'm physically on paper, not on paper, electronically, whatever. We model our pricing based on a US dollar because pretty much everywhere we work, Central America, even though, some countries have their own currencies, it's still a US dollar based system from a supplier standpoint for all the materials that we need. And the vast majority of our clients are North American. So they'll pay with US dollars. We take Canadian dollars. We take euros. We take francs. We don't care, pounds. We've taken many different currencies over the years because for us, whatever that value we're receiving is can be translated, into a dollar equivalent that we can then, make the adjustment on that number, right? But we price our properties at sort of a US dollar equivalent. And so, right. So, the challenge is if you go to a conference saying you're talking about, oh, this tiny home here is 4 Bitcoins, right? Or whatever it is, then the challenge is, okay, well, somebody goes home and they call you up in a week and now it's 4.5 or it's 3.5 or whatever it is, right? So that kind of volatility is challenging. We just sort of, we're pretty upfront. Like, hey, look, we're pricing in US dollar equivalent. And whatever the Bitcoin equivalent is, that's what you need to deliver to us to have ownership of that home or condominium. And, I think over time, the volatility of Bitcoin is going to settle down. Again, as it becomes more transactional and the speculators are out of the marketplace and it really becomes that medium of transaction for people generally, then the volatility will reduce significantly. I don't think it'll never be gone. The dollar moves, right? All currencies move against other currencies, but they move within a much tighter range. And I'm guessing that 5 years from now, Bitcoin will be moving in a much, much tighter range than it is today.
I'm curious then, Mike, if you can maybe break this down a little bit. Are you saying that you guys will sort of agree upon a price, say Bitcoin at $40,000 a coin USD, and then obviously no real estate deal happens within 24 hours. It takes some time to get all the lawyers and have the money move everywhere. So should the price have a significant move, either downside or upside, is that sort of what you're saying? Like you'll agree to a price on this date, regardless of what the price is on date of execution?
Yeah, although we usually bring it right in because what we actually build to order. We don't actually spec build homes. Oh, that's not true. We do a little bit, but generally 98% of our business is build to order, right? So somebody comes along and says, I want this tiny house, and we work through the paperwork and let's just call it 150,000, just an easy number, right? And so it's 150. And so on the day we decide to transact, right? Everybody's lined up. We get online, we move whatever that equivalent of 150 in Bitcoin is over to my wallet. Now, if in the next hour or two or next day, Bitcoin moves radically one way or the other, that's me. I own that, right? So once the client has paid the $150,000 equivalent, all risk with the coin is mine, both up and down, right? I mean, it moves both ways. So, and that's why we have a standing order with Coinbase now to take 95% of it and put it into dollars. I can't risk the volatility. 5%, I'm willing to risk the volatility on that 5, but not the money I need to actually, build their house and run our business, right? I can't put that at volatility risk.
Do you think that ignoring the shift in volatility, would something like more countries adopting Bitcoin as legal tender start to move that 5% allocation wider, or what factors are you paying attention to in regards to potentially shifting that?
Yeah, I think it's largely the volatility issue and the trading range over time. So I think that's going to flatten. I think we're going to see that range really come down. I think more countries adopting Bitcoin as legal tender means more people transacting, right? And so again, when the Bitcoin comes out of the hand of the speculators who are looking for big gains, right, and into the hands of people who want to transact with it, and it's a limited supply. Again, I mean, we have a fixed supply. So that, if there's, I guess we're still making, we're still mining some, but not much longer. I mean, we're kind of getting to the end of that, right? As a percentage, we're down to the last, 15% or something, right? So as coins come out of the investor speculative people's hands into the transactional hands, right, that's going to definitely reduce that. The thing that's going to reduce it mostly for us, though, is the fact that in El Salvador, we're going to be able to keep maybe 10 or 15%, because literally we're going to get that coin and we're going to go pay our supplier with it, right? So for us, the ability to keep more means that it becomes more transactional for us. Again, we're not really keeping that 5%. I mean, that's actually more of a philosophical basis for us. Again, we have employees that we pay with it. We anticipate some contractor payments, but we also are pretty, bullish on Bitcoin. So there's a speculative play to that 5% as well. But again, for us to have it be transactional is the most important thing. And again, and Panama, I mean, Panama's, again, rumblings, we're going to look at some legislation, I hope so. Again, if and when they really pull the trigger and make it legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender alongside the US dollar there, that's a big economy, just like El Salvador. I don't know how big the Central African Republic economy is. I don't think it's particularly big. Panama's got a very large US dollar economy. So as more and more large economies do this, the stabilization of that value is going to continue. So
one thing I wanted to just jump in with is, how does the allocation that you're setting up, how does that interact with some of the new systems that are being built out with stable coins like on Taro and things like that? Does that change those parameters at all?
So far, no. We have a couple people in the company that pay attention to that. Gabriella Repetto really is the person on the front lines of keeping track of what's happening in the industry and understanding what those might mean for us internally on our, I guess I'm going to call it our finance side, right? Because that's really where that crypto piece lays. But she's not brought anything to my attention at this point that would indicate any of that has changed our allocations at this point.
Got it.
Can I just add one thing just real quick? And I touched on it a minute ago, and I just want to circle back. And that's this notion of the difference between North America and Latin America. We talked about the difference in entitlements and time to build and things like that. But there's another piece that's really consumer centric. And that's this idea of moving from what I call the land of seller beware, right, to the land of buyer beware. And in the US, we've got all kinds of consumer protection agencies. We've got lots of regulations. We've got lemon laws. I mean, just on and on and on, where we really are consumers within a very protective bubble, right? It's hard for somebody to screw us, right? It's not impossible. I mean, Enron happened, but for the most part, it's hard for a company to really kind of give it to us bad. When we go south of the border, we leave the land of consumer protection. We leave the land of seller beware, and we enter the land of buyer beware. And what this means really is that we have to change how we think. And that's not easy, by the way. And there are two tenets to this. There are two tenets. We have to forget what we think we know first. Like, we bring assumptions with us, right? We like, oh, it's going to be this way, right? And I give one example, and this is it's a very visual example, so this isn't so great. But when we buy a property anywhere, we in North America, we assume that we have hot and cold running water in all the bathrooms, right? We just assume we have it. And when we buy property overseas, that assumption is very dangerous. And I have this picture of a condo in Costa Rica that was beautiful. I mean, $1 million view. I mean, I think it was a 4th or 5th story condo, looks out over the Pacific Ocean, nice bathrooms, nice faucets, $150 Moen or Delta faucets up on top, mirrors, lighting, the bathrooms, beautiful, right? Two taps, one on the left, one on the right, cold and hot. And you turn one on, water comes out. You turn the other one on, water comes out. But unless you get rid of this assumption, right, that you're going to have hot water, and get down on your hands and knees and look under the sink, what you see when you look under the sink is a cold water pipe coming out with a Y splitter so that there's water to both taps, but it's cold in both cases.
So interesting.
And the shower is cold too. See, so we have to forget the assumption. Like, the assumptions are dangerous. Oh yeah, everything's hot and cold. 2 taps, of course it is. Of course it's not, right? And the other axiom is that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we have to get down on our hands and knees and look under the sink, right? And so this concept is it's hard. I mean, we actually created something called the Consumer Resource Guide, right? It's 15 questions that people should ask when they buy property overseas, right? It's 15 things that we bring assumptions that are incorrect, or we don't know what we don't know, or in some cases, it's both, right? And what these questions really help us do as consumers is frame our thinking, or help us think a new way. Hey, I need to think differently because I am in buyer beware. So I have to ask questions I would never ask in the US or Canada. And if I do that, I can actually make a really good decision, right? It's not that we shouldn't buy property overseas. We just need to approach it differently. And so, as sort of a word of caution, as people get excited about buying property in El Salvador or other places, right? Go for it. I mean, absolutely go for it. But look, if people own in our community, they're going to have hot and cold water. I mean, we put in hot and cold water, and we put in electrical service that meets US standards. I mean, there are just a lot of things that, again, we just don't think about. But a lot of people are going to buy properties other places, and I hope they do. I mean, look, we're going to build 300 residences, and I hope 300,000 residences get sold, in El Salvador, right? I mean, or some big number, right? I think it'd be wonderful. I hope lots of people move there, and we get our 300 of them, and everyone else gets the rest, right? But the consumer coming outside the US, coming to El Salvador, has to be able to really change how they think. And this, the Consumer Resource Guide is a great tool to help people do that. So that would be the one word of caution. Slow down, proceed with caution, change how we think. And if we do that, we will make a good buying decision, a good ownership decision for a property overseas. But humility. If I had to just sum it up, humility, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a great thing to reiterate. I think of Bitcoin as one of the things that it's about is kind of radical personal responsibility, right? If you're holding your own private keys, you have to take responsibility for owning it. And that's something that, in a different access, people are not used to doing. Everybody's used to being able to like spend money and then being like, oh, someone tried to steal my money. And then they call a credit card company, and the credit card company reverses the transaction, or something went wrong with my bank account. I lost my password. And there's somebody there who can basically just magically make it go away. And what people don't realize is that that kind of oversight, those kinds of systems have a significant cost, and they end up often being used against you. And so one of the things that is amazing about Bitcoin, and also, as you said, something that requires humility for people that are new to it, is this radical personal responsibility. So it's very interesting to me that translates to, buying property. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of Bitcoiners will be very used to that. And when framed as like, you keep your private keys very safe because you have to.
Yep.
It sounds like it's a similar thing when you're investing in property overseas.
It is. P, thank you. I love that. Radical personal responsibility. That's a beautiful way to say it. And if with your permission, I am going to pick up that line and use it in the future.
Absolutely. Go for it.
That's a good one. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Radical personal responsibility. Exactly. Right.
Mike, I'm going to paraphrase this question that we got from our chat. So essentially, I think the way I want to phrase it and have you walk us through, talk to us a little bit about when investors can buy into your next development, and then where a potential resident fits into that equation as well. I know you said you guys don't build. Your sort of timeline is you essentially collect the money and then go off to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what if someone who wants to be an investor or owner of a property isn't ready to live there? Talk us through sort of like what accommodations, if any, or systems you guys have in place. Like, is it easy for me to purchase one of the next lots and then just be Airbnb that out? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So what we've done in El Zonte is we actually set up a first right of selection program, fully refundable $2,500 Bitcoin deposit. And basically it gives you the first right of selection. And that's really about a year from now. I mean, and I don't know, like 25, 30 people have signed up for this, right? So next, let's just say next April, whatever, next May, we come to them and say, here's all the properties. They pick that one, or they say, give me my money back. No problem. I mean, one or the other, right? They pick one, now they're in. And so again, the construction timeline is about 12 months from the time somebody says, I want it, to the time they, get the keys. So again, we'd be looking at April of 24 at that point for the keys. And so, right, if somebody says, well, I want to use it a couple of weeks a year, but I'm not ready to move down there full time, that's easy. We actually, again, we have a hospitality component to our business, because a lot of people are exactly like the person who asked that question. They want to put their property in a rental program. They want to receive some income from the property until they're ready to actually use it full time. Or by the way, we have some folks who never plan to use their property. They really see it as a rental cash flow investment for them for the long term, and maybe they use it as a vacation property once in a while. But it was the intended purpose with the ownership is to have it be a cash flow property as opposed to a residence. So we do that, and our hospitality business is well developed in Belize and Nicaragua currently, and we'll be doing the same thing in El Salvador when we bring that online.
Love that, guys. So any of you out there who are looking for your next Airbnb property, make sure you guys check out all the stuff that ECI is developing and building out. I know you guys are currently building out the community, the village. Talk to us about where you have your eyes set next. Maybe it's somewhere else in El Salvador, maybe it's somewhere else entirely. Do you mind sharing or divulging?
Yeah, no, not at all. We actually, in two things going on. One, we have all of our properties in Belize are out on Ambergris Key, which is the main island off the coast. But next week, I'm like, when is that? It's next week. I'm down in Belize, and we'll be closing on a jungle property. We're working with a big Bitcoiner who purchased a resort in Belize. We actually he contracted us to operate that resort for him, called Table Rock. It's 11 little cool, very cool cottages in the jungle right on the Mopan River. It's spectacular. And we're closing on a property next to it for a residential community. So building a small village right next to the resort there. That's probably our next, what I'm going to call real live because it's already got roads, water, access. I mean, it's kind of ready to go. So we'll roll that one pretty quick. We have another project in Panama. It'll be our third project in Panama at the beach that it'll be a joint venture sometime this fall. We should have our permitting in place and be able to offer those products. And then a crazy one, totally really an outlier for us, is a villa in Portugal. It's in the Azores, actually. It's in the Azore Islands, about 2 hours west of Lisbon, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If you've never looked up the Azores, I hadn't until I was there last year. It is spectacular. It's beautiful. It's green, and these 9 little volcanic islands out in the middle of the ocean. But just a wonderful Portuguese culture. We're closing on a villa there in June that's already an operating bed and breakfast, and we're going to build some additional homes around that villa. So 3 things kind of in the works over the next, say, 12 months that folks might want to keep an eye out for. Very different, 3 very different things. And by the way, you mentioned something else in El Salvador. For us, the 300 residences, whatever, that's really about a 3 to 5 year build out once we start. And so we'll stay focused on that until maybe we're 2/3, 3/4 done, and then we'll begin looking for something else in El Salvador. So probably 2025, 2026, we'd be looking at doing additional product in El Salvador.
Chris, do you think now is a good time for us to pitch David Bailey on getting a Bitcoin magazine house?
There you go. I do.
A content house. Let's do it.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up.
I think CK just had a heart attack with the amount of money that would go into that. Mike, one last question from me before I let you sort of share with everyone how to stay up to date with everything. I love sort of what you guys are building, the community aspect of it, how, people need to be these convicted individuals who want this experience, who want this lifestyle. Yeah. I'm curious how you, if at all, want to incorporate more of a circular economy where you see some of the energy that's being used also maybe is mining or helping to mine Bitcoin for this community that is then able to capitalize on the Bitcoin that's mined to leverage out and continue to expand or grow these communities or villages. Any thoughts like that?
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of what we're doing with the tiny homes is, so I'll make up a number, I'm close on it, 77, 79 homes under construction at our Grand Pacifica community right now, tiny homes under construction. They are all 100% solar off grid. And so this is a big part of what we're doing with our tiny homes. In fact, we actually have homes up to about 2,000 square feet that are 100% off the grid as well. So we're big into gray water recycling. We have an agricultural component. Agricultural resiliency is a pretty important factor as well. So in the El Zonte project, that piece won't be there because it's a pretty compressed property. But where we have space, we do integrate agricultural elements for that resiliency. But the solar and so one of the things that we'd like to do in El Zonte is tie all of the solar together, or maybe not all of it, but much of it into chunks, because during the daytime, once your battery's full, right? But you're still producing electricity. And to have that surplus then run across to a mining center where the mining center would mine and produce coin, which would then offset, HOA costs, right? I mean, look, there will be an HOA. I mean, you gotta keep the streets, and you can keep the lights on, and and the amenities, keep the pool pumps working, and keep the pool. I mean, just all the things that takes money to do, have security and all those kinds of things. So we actually have talked about taking the excess electricity from the solar on everybody's homes, having it come in and contribute to mining that would offset the general expenses of operating the property for the homeowners association. So I think, that's one element. I don't know that it will be hugely profitable per se, but I do think there will be an offset of significant HOA costs with the power that's produced from that. So again, I don't know the exact latitude. I think it's maybe 13, 14. I mean, it's strong sun, and about 7-8 months out of the year, it's really strong sun. It's overhead. I mean, it's actually physically overhead a couple times a year as it passes over. So great solar uptake, and then being able to utilize that, for mining to offset HOA costs. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. And Mike, I want to give you one last opportunity. I know that we've talked a lot and touched on a lot of different topics, but sort of give you the open mic, whether it's on this topic or something else entirely, just anything that we didn't touch on.
No, I really thank you guys for having me on and the conversation. The only thing that if it's okay, I would just like to tell folks how to get a copy of the Consumer Resource Guide. Is that okay? Yeah. I mean, easy. I'm an old guy. Look at me. So I'm still email. So I hope you guys are email, but Bitcoin@ECIdevelopment.com. Bitcoin@ECIdevelopment.com. We'll send you this. This is our Consumer Resource Guide. 15 questions that you should ask when you want to look at property ownership overseas. And if you see something in there, I mean, our website's in there. By the way, this is not a sales document. This is articles. These are the 15 questions. There's some little mini country handbooks. I think, like 5 or 6 little country handbooks we've got in here. So if you see anything you want, you can follow up with that. But we'd love to put this in your hand, because then you become the kind of consumer who's educated and smart. And if you're out there in El Salvador stomping around, you're going to look under the sink and you're going to see if there's hot water. You're going to go look at the panel box to make sure that it's got more than 4 breakers in it. I mean, just little things that, again, we as North Americans would never think to do, but we probably want to do if we want to love the home that we own. And you know what? A few of you probably will decide to become owners with us in El Zonte, but the vast majority of you are going to buy somewhere else. And when you buy somewhere else, buy well, buy right, love the place that you own, and become incredible advocates for the expat property ownership overseas lifestyle. Raise the tide, because when you're telling great stories about your wonderful life in San Salvador or down the beach or anywhere in El Salvador, or if you buy a house in Thailand, whatever it is, when you're telling a great story about how awesome it is to buy property and live overseas or vacation overseas in your home, it really does great things for everybody who's doing it. So we're happy to provide this resource to you, and hope that you'll use it.
Awesome. So everyone who wants to, please check out it, Bitcoin@ECIdevelopment.com.
That's it.
And Mike, where can, if people want to stay up to date with some of the projects you guys are building or get updates on the company, is there anywhere on social media that our generation, the young guys, can stay up to date with you on?
Yes. And I wish I knew what they were. It's horrible. But we do. We have a Facebook page. We have Instagram pages. We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. And so all of that is out there. I wish I could tell you what those are off the top of my head. My bad. I will do better next time.
It's all good. Honestly, we were laughing because I was like, I don't think Mike has a Twitter, because we like to put our guests' Twitter handles on the screen. So I did find the ECI Development Twitter page. So that is on the screen. So be sure to check that out, guys. And Mike, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you. We'll be chatting again soon, or keeping an eye out for updates on the project at El Zonte and everywhere else around Central America.
Really? Yeah. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate everything you're doing for the industry, and we'll see. Hey, look, next year at the Bitcoin conference, let's make sure we meet in person. Okay.
Love that.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Guys, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. Then we're going to chat, just a few of us, before we're joined by Econo Alchemist. And then we are going to dive right into Bitcoin mining at the homes. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss these conversations. Oof.